Over the past number of years, Disney has been digging into their back catalog and remaking their earlier films for new generation, and most people seem to have varying opinions on these. Some consider The Jungle Book to be the best of this crop, while others gravitate towards Pete's Dragon, and Aladdin also has its fans. However, my personal favorite of these new Disney redos is Kenneth Branagh's version of Cinderella. I thought this was a lovely film that was able to pay homage to the animated classic while also doing its own thing and not feeling so tied down to what came before it. I should probably mention my thoughts on the animated film. I think very highly of that movie, which did a beautiful job of adapting the fairy tale and sprinkling it with the right dosage of Disney animation magic. Cinderella is a sympathetic lead, Lady Tremaine makes for a chilling villain, and the antics of the mice and Lucifer the cat provide plenty of laughs. The songwriters created a number of unforgettable tunes, including A Dream Is a Wish Your Heart Makes, Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, and So This Is Love. Add the brilliant animation on top, and you have a film that has rightfully earned its place as an enchanting and timeless classic from the Walt Disney Studios. With this live-action take, Kenneth Branagh seemed intent on keeping that timeless feel, and make a film that retains a charming and old-fashioned spirit throughout. Nowadays, whenever a fairy tale is adapted, filmmakers cannot help but wink to the audience and comment on the absurdity of the premise. Even Disney is not immune to this. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that approach, but it's refreshing to see Cinderella present its story without a hint of irony. The whole production just feels genuine, and that adds to the film's likability. Let's start with the main reason the movie works so well, Cinderella herself. We see what a ray of sunshine she is, and how kind and optimistic she is, and that makes the tragedy that happens to her all the more heartbreaking. Lily James was such perfect casting, and she expertly handles the task of playing someone who frequently tries to keep her head up high, even as she is reduced to being a maid by her stepmother and stepsisters. Those early scenes with her parents are particularly important in showing one of the film's main messages. Her mother's advice to have courage and be kind radiates throughout the movie and becomes an important message to the audience too. The animated film did not delve that much into Ella's early life or her parents, so I really liked those scenes that show how close they were and how they instilled good life lessons in her. This is in contrast to Lady Tremaine, who tries everything in her power to stamp out Ella's kindness and good nature. I've often seen people wonder why she doesn't just leave, but why should she leave? That's her house and her only memory of her parents, and by going, then Tremaine has won in showing her power over Ella. As for Tremaine, Cate Blanchett did a superb job of portraying Cinderella's evil stepmother. The film shows her motivations and her hatred for Ella as she tries to demean her in the most cruel ways. There's an enjoyment she gets out of this torment, and that just makes her all the more despicable. She seems to have this attitude of, if I cannot be happy, then neither should this girl. We also see how opportunist she tries to be, and how her only goal seems to be becoming a part of high society, along with her spoiled daughters. The prince has an expanded role in this version, thus giving more reason for why he falls in love with Cinderella. We already see excellent chemistry between the two in their first scene together in the woods, long before the ball. We see his kindness and desires, and the relationship he has with his father. It makes sense why he becomes so determined to find this mysterious girl who dropped the glass slipper. Some of the loveliest scenes in Cinderella are the moments with Ella and Prince Kit. Lily James and Richard Madden have such a wonderful spark that elevates those scenes. Meanwhile, Helena Bonham Carter makes the most with her small but pivotal role as the fairy godmother. She brings such a delightful bounciness to the character, along with a delicate touch when showing her softer and caring side. The decision to have her as the narrator was a smart one, make her seem even more of a watchful presence in Ella's life. While the movie does use the character names and contains a few references to the Disney animated film, Branagh and screenwriter Chris Weitz don't attempt to copy that version. This feels like its own interpretation of the classic fairy tale and seeks to develop the characters and story in a different way that still respects the famous Charles Perrault version of Cinderella. I appreciate that Disney did not force the filmmakers to do a shot-for-shot remake of what the animators had already masterfully accomplished, and gave Branagh the freedom to bring his own classical sensibilities to the project. If anything, this makes the nods to the animated film feel even more special. Branagh opted not to make his Cinderella a musical, instead singing the songs for the end credits. Ending the movie with Lily James' cover of A Dream Is a Wish Your Heart Makes and Helena Bonham Carter singing Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo felt like a nice after-dinner treat and a lovely way to send the audience off. Meanwhile, the production values were of exceptional quality. Disney and the producers spared no expense on making the kingdom come alive, with everyone putting an enormous amount of effort. Dante Ferretti's production design looked appropriately grand and classical when inside the castle walls, while Cinderella's house had an inviting quality to it. And costume designer Sandy Powell brought a wonderful color palette to the many clothes we see in the movie. An especially important ingredient was Patrick Doyle's score. He composed probably his best compositions in a career full of excellent music. The score had the necessary fairy tale magic and soared in all the right places, and also heartfelt when the scene called for it. There were two scenes in particular that Branagh and his team especially had to get right. One is the transformation scene, where the fairy godmother gives Cinderella her iconic dress. The efforts of Doyle, Powell, and the special effects artists really helped in selling the magic of this moment, as did Lily James' reaction. The other pivotal sequence is when Ella and Prince Kit dance for the first time. An actual grand ballroom was constructed at Pinewood Studios specifically for this scene, complete with orchestra and real chandeliers and many costumed extras. From the second she first walks into the room to when they finish their dance, you really sense the connection between these two characters. Scenes like these really show what cinema is capable of, and are also examples of what an enormously talented director Kenneth Branagh is. Now, the story of Cinderella is one that has gotten some heat in recent years, with many finding the character to be too passive, and someone who gets a shoe fitting and then all of her problems are solved. I personally disagree with that interpretation. When you get down to it, Cinderella is about a young woman who frequently suffers abuse and negativity but attempts to keep her positivity intact. That requires an enormous amount of strength and makes me admire Cinderella even more. And her wish to go to the ball is not out of some desire to meet and marry a handsome prince, like the Disney films often misinterpreted as. She wants to have a good time for at least one night. She wants the magical moment where she can participate in the festivities like the other people in the kingdom. The live-action movie expands on this by her also wanting to hang out with her friend, who she is unaware is the prince. Throughout the film, Lady Tremaine is continually trying to force her pessimism and negativity onto Ella, and take away everything she holds dear. We see the emotional toil this has on Ella, but she retains the lessons her parents taught her and makes sure to have courage and be kind. At the end, when she says, "I forgive you" to her stepmother, that is the final salt in the wound to prove that Tremaine's wicked ways did not have the intended effect on her. To conclude, Cinderella succeeded at being a magical experience, with Kenneth Branagh relying on classic filmmaking techniques to tell this famous story. There's a wonderful and genuine sincerity to the film I greatly admire, and the entire production was designed with so much imagination and creativity. While Lily James had a notable role on Downton Abbey, this was the project that proved she has an incredible screen presence, and this was a note-perfect casting choice on the filmmaker's part. Most importantly, the film has an enormous heart. Cinderella is exactly the kind of movie you can watch and it just puts you in a good mood due to how sweet-natured and likable the whole production is. This is a film that celebrates optimism and empathy, and its message to have courage and be kind is one I think we could all learn and try to remember in our daily lives. With this being the start of a new year and a new decade, I hope we can all take a little something from Cinderella, and maybe we can try to have courage and be kind with one another and not let the Lady Tremaines of the world get to you and stamp out the things that make you a good person. See you next time.